stock reporter. We are just hours away from the U.S. presidential elections. Maura Fogarty is on election watch, and she's going to talk to us now about, excuse me, what a McCain or Obama presidency means for Asia.
Yeah, to a large extent, Maura, that is going to depend on actually who is going to best handle the U.S. economy. That's the key question. The biggest challenge is going to be, of course, navigating what could be a very prolonged and deep economic downturn in the U.S. And the shorter and shallower the economic downturn is, the better off Asia is going to be, given that this region still depends so heavily on exports. The biggest beneficiaries, of course, is going to be China and Japan, the two biggest exporters in Asia to the United States and to the rest of the world. Now, Senator Obama wants a second stimulus package to jumpstart the economy worth around $175 billion, which includes a whole array of spending measures, including spending on infrastructure, as well as tax cuts for most Americans. On the other hand, Senator McCain also has some other tax cuts he plans as well, but he also wants to use about $300 billion, Martin, of that $700 billion bailout package that Congress passed to buy up troubled mortgages. He believes that will help stabilize housing prices and thus translate into a direct stimulus for the U.S. economy without widening the deficit by too much. Regardless of who is the next American president, the fiscal deficit, now at around $450 billion US, is definitely going to balloon by some estimates to $1 trillion next year. On the foreign policy front, both men don't have as big differences with respect to Asia as they do elsewhere around the world. McCain is seen as more likely to focus on traditional allies like Japan and on China's lack of democracy.
McCain's going to focus much more on traditional U.S. allies around the world, military allies. That means Japan. Clearly, there'd be a lot more focus on the authoritarian nature of the Chinese government. There'd also be a lot more focus on the military threat that was raised by China in terms of cyber attacks on the Pentagon, space warfare, ballistic missile weaponry, and all of that sort of thing.
In contrast, an Obama presidency is seen as more likely to engage Asia in a lot more dialogue, and especially so with China.
An Obama presidency for Asia is going to be pretty balanced, I think, in terms of trying to engage everybody, be multilateral. It'll be soft out of the box. The one thing you would certainly expect from an Obama administration that would be different is that they would focus a lot more in trying to continue some form of strategic economic dialogue with the Chinese government.
And trade, of course, is a central issue given the importance of the U.S. as a trading partner for this region. Mr. McCain has a very strong record as a staunch advocate of free trade. With Obama, it is a little bit less clear given his comments on NAFTA during the Democratic primaries, and especially in resisting the proposed free trade agreements with South Korea on grounds that that deal leaves U.S. auto workers unprotected. Nonetheless, Obama has publicly stated that China must stop manipulating its currency. In a letter to a U.S. textile group recently, Mr. Obama said that China's huge trade surplus with the U.S. is, quote, directly related to its manipulation of its currency value. To give you some context here, in the entire 8 years of the Bush administration, President Bush has refused to formally call China a currency manipulator. Mr. Obama's comments come in reaction to, of course, rising protectionism among the American public and in the U.S. Congress, and that, analysts say, will have to be dealt with regardless of who is in the White House.
I hope that one of the things which the next president of the United States will be prepared to take on is rising protectionist sentiment in Congress, and particularly the way in which that is directed towards China.
And as always, Martin, either way, you can see U.S.-China relations getting slightly more complicated, but we hear that, of course, every single time we get a new president. That shows you how important the China-U.S. relationship is to this entire region.
Indeed, indeed. Okay, stay right there. It's time to bring in Ross Feingold. He is Chairman of Asia for Americans Abroad for McCain, live out of our Hong Kong studios. Also with us right here on set is Patricia Reed, member of Democrats Abroad Global Executive Committee. She's here on set. Also staying with us out of New York is Don Strassheim from Roth Capital Partners. All of you, good morning. In the case of you, Don, good evening. Ross, let me start with you in Hong Kong. More was just talking about Senator McCain. Good on security. He's a free trader. He's also seen as more market friendly, and there are a lot of Americans that are investors, yet he's lagging in the polls. Explain.
Well, as you've been discussing, Senator McCain has a long history of being very outspoken in favor of free trade. He was a leader for PNTR with China. He's been an outspoken advocate of the Korean Free Trade Agreement. And I think, as you see in the last 48 hours, voters are starting to come around to Senator Obama's anti-business and anti-trade positions, and we're looking for a big turnaround in the next 24 hours.
All right, Patricia, got to ask you here. I mean, we talked about this earlier on in the show. This wasn't just campaign rhetoric, him sounding a lot harsher on free trade, threatening China as well. I mean, what's it going to be like if and when he does get to the White House?
Well, I think Obama has demonstrated that he is a pragmatist. He has taken a lot of positions historically that he has changed on based on new evidence. And I think that one thing that we can be assured of is that Obama weighs the pros and the cons of any situation and makes decisions accordingly. I think a lot of his rhetoric during his campaign might just be that. It's very hard to tell. But I do think that he's going to do what's best for America and best for the middle class.
You know, the thing is, I mean, changing one's position based on the latest or freshest evidence sounds like a good thing on the surface. On the other hand, though, a lot of people might say, here's another candidate that says one thing. Once he gets to the White House, though, he does another.
Well, I don't think it's a question of flip-flopping. It's a question of really taking and we saw this during the economic crisis, right? McCain dropped everything, ran to Washington, made a lot of noise, actually didn't even get his own House Republicans behind him on the same bill that he was supposed to be promoting. So I think right now we're looking at someone who looks at a strategic long-term value, looks at the points that support the position he wants to take, and maintains that position throughout. He's done that with his campaign. He's taking a very long-term strategic approach, has not wavered, has kept really a high road. We've seen a lot of grace under pressure, and I expect to see a lot of that in this presidency as well.
Ross, it's Maura here, but I can just jump in. Senator McCain has a very long history in Asia, and foreign policy is considered to be his expertise, of course. But I want to talk to you about the China-U.S. relationship, which is a very key relationship for the stability of this entire region. Most people expect the Republican presidency is always a little bit better for free trade, open markets, and for Asia as well. That tends to be the perception here in this region. But with Senator McCain, some of the questions relate to how close he wants to rely on traditional allies like Japan, for example, at a time when China's still trying to find its footing in the global world and the global stage. How do you see that relationship, which has been so carefully nurtured during the Bush administration and the Clinton administration, playing out during a McCain administration?
Well, as we've discussed, Senator McCain is a very outspoken, with a long history of being pro-free trade, and he realizes that engagement with China is important, and you don't turn back the clock by erecting trade barriers. That would be bad for the United States. It would be bad for the Asia Pacific, and Senator McCain knows that. But he also knows that agreements such as the Korea trade deal are important for the region. They're important for a level playing field, and I think China realizes that as well, and that the United States needs to be as engaged as China in opening up markets and allowing an unfettered flow of people and goods throughout the region. And Senator Obama just has a drastically different direction. The bottom line is, for Americans living here in Asia who are business people involved in exports, erecting trade barriers is a big turn in the wrong direction, and hopefully Americans in this region realize that and have been supporting Senator McCain.
All right, Ross Feingold, hold that thought. We'll come back and keep talking to Ross. Also to Patricia Reed from Democrats Abroad, plus Donald Strassheim from Roth Capital Partners in just a little bit. Next up on Squawk this Tuesday, Singapore's Temasek Holdings, a sovereign wealth fund, said to have suffered billions of dollars in paper losses in October. We'll get to details when we come right back.